Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast where a behavioral scientist examines what it's like to live a humorous life. Glimpse into the lives of the funniest people in entertainment, business, and science as your host, Dr. Peter McGraw, explores their habits, motivations, and secrets to success. Get ready to fire up your brain and your funny bone. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast that looks at the lives of funny people. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is UK comedian Gordon Southern. With over 20 years of comedy experience, he has performed all over the world, and he refers to himself as the international word clown. He's a regular on the Australian comedy circuit, which is where I'm talking to him right now. Welcome, Gordon.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So if you weren't working as a comedian, don't look at my notes.
Sorry, I was cheating.
If you weren't working as a comedian, what would you be doing?
That's a very interesting question because I've kind of devoted my entire life to comedy. So I came straight from university into it.
Okay.
I know that as a young man, I had aspirations to either be an actor or an advertising copywriter. And in some ways, I think being a comedian is a melding of those two professions because you have the creativity of the advertising copywriter and the performance skills of an actor. So I think I was maybe always hardwired into going in that direction.
So you're writing copy during the day and then you're performing it at night.
That's kind of what I'm doing, yes.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm making my own tiny adverts.
and hence this word clown. So you're very... I almost said lyrical. That's probably not the right word.
I'd love to think I was lyrical. I did spend a lot of time thinking I was a very poetic and soulful comedian. Then I realised I just wasn't getting enough laughs.
And so then you turn to what?
Then you just start editing.
So are you a literary? Do you read a lot?
I wish I could read more, but I came from a sort of literary background, studied English and drama.
Okay.
And I do like a comedian who has a good turn of phrase.
Turn of phrase?
Yes.
You know, I love talking to comedians who are not American.
Right.
Because it's just the words and the language are different.
Yeah, I think so. There's a real distinction between the North American comedians and I think British ones. That we tend to be maybe a bit more surreal and whimsical.
Okay.
Whereas a lot of the Americans seem almost businesslike, ruthless in their efficiency to get to extract as many laughs as they can.
Well, I mean, you're meeting with an American who's working on a Saturday afternoon in Melbourne.
Exactly.
Right.
That's huge commitment.
That sums it up. All right. So tell me about this copywriter idea. I teach marketing, and so I'm interested in that draw.
I think because I didn't know that stand-up comedy was an option, I wanted to be a writer, and my first ever, or comedy writer, and my first ever comedy engagements were writing one-liners and sketches for radio comedy. Okay. And then myself and 5 other colleagues, we created a comedy sketch team. So that is very writer heavy. Mm-hmm. And then if you're performing it on radio, there's certain vocal performance skills that you develop, but physically you don't have to because you're just there in front of a mic reading off of scripts.
Yeah, because I saw you do voiceover work.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Just because it pays well?
It used to pay very well. Like a lot of things in this profession. Oh, the money was great before the GFC.
So tell me about... I like to think I have a good voice.
Yeah.
I think
you do. I think you do.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I have a terrible singing voice, but I think I have a good speaking voice.
Right, which is why we're not singing this particular podcast.
Trust me, I already have 0 listeners. I'd like that to come up. Let's suppose the money was good, and I wanted to do a little side hustle doing voiceover work.
Yeah.
Just having a good voice is not enough.
Well, for me, voiceover work came through being a stand-up comedian.
Okay.
And what happens is your agent will go, oh, see if we can get you some voiceover gigs, because they're quite easy money if they go well. And I was sort of hired on the basis that I'd be handed a script and I would be creative with that script.
Oh, so you could improv.
Exactly. But there's also people who just have these voices that drip honey and they walk into the studio and they can also do that magical skill, which is to, at the end of the advert goes, you know, costs may vary, must end bank holiday Monday. But yeah, like a machine gun of words.
That's not a different person.
Sometimes it's a different person. I've done adverts where you do the funny bit at the beginning and then this guy comes in like, and I'm the closer.
Is that right? That's really interesting. And so, but are there like, so obviously, so if you're doing improvisational work within this, I assume you're just doing, you might do 50 takes of the same thing and you're kind of fussing around with it?
Well, usually if they've got a 30-second advert to do and they've got an hour's studio time, they'll get as many takes as possible. Yeah. And there's always some quiet person in the back of the studio. And then the guy goes, sorry, Gordon, the client wants you to make the product sound more reliable by your tone of voice. I'll see what I can do.
What were there certain products or like certain personas that you kind of shine? Like they're like, well, we need to bring in Gordon because he's great at selling copy.
No. It was just dumb luck. I've only done a handful of voiceover. There was a time when there was so much money in voiceover. I was on holiday with my girlfriend in Spain.
Okay.
And after one day on holiday, I get the phone call, you need to come back. And it was for this reason. It was a soap product.
Okay.
And in the voiceover, I had to say, kills 99.9% of bacteria all the time. And then they went to their lawyers and they went, oh, we're not sure if we can claim that legitimately. So I had to fly back at my own expense.
Okay.
Because I knew the money would make it worthwhile to say, kills 99.9% of bacteria most of the time. And that was like, oh, right, now we're legally allowed to sell this soap.
That's hilarious.
Because they've got to have that 0.1% so that if the soap doesn't protect you from bacteria, you can't sue.
You're the 1 in 1,000.
Whatever the soap company may or may not have been.
Okay.
Carex soap. It was Carex.
And that's better than Dove, which is 99 and 44%.
Is that all it is?
Pure.
Right.
It's a different thing. So let's talk more about words, though. So international word clown, which I think is interesting because that sums you up, right? Because that's the copywriter.
Yeah.
Right? That's the writer, the word part, and then the clown is the performer.
And the physicality of it, yes.
Yeah. I watched some of your clips. Like you have a big personality on stage.
Yeah, I tend to sort of jump around quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's a sweaty undertaking.
This is weird. Do you wear certain clothes because you sweat a lot on stage?
So funny you mentioned that. Last night, as you might know, it was 42 degrees.
It was like 105.
Oh, in American money? Yeah, it was hot.
People. It was blazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I had on a nice light blue shirt. And I knew to take another shirt with me to work so I could wear the dark denim shirt on stage, which wouldn't show the sweat patches.
Uh-huh.
And a couple of the comedians went, 2 shirts? Good idea.
Yeah, it's like costuming.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have to... I mean, I do some speaking and stuff like that, and I'm very cautious about the shirts I wear.
You don't want to wear pale grey is the worst one, I would say.
I like a lot of whites.
White's good, dark's good.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you're up on stage, have you been trained as a clown?
No, I did a drama degree. That was sort of most of my training, and then everything else. With stand-up comedy, you have to learn on the job.
Okay.
And the brilliant and also awful thing about being a comedian is your entire apprenticeship is in public.
It's true.
So all your failures and successes have to be witnessed or else they don't exist.
Yeah, we were chatting before this about, I was making a comment about how difficult your craft is.
To start with, yes.
Yeah, and you were saying, I don't know.
Yeah.
But you're 20 years in.
Yeah. When you start out, it is terrifying because for a lot of people, it's in their top 3 things they dread doing.
Yes.
Is public speaking.
Right. And it's a particularly difficult form of public speaking because you're having to not just inform people but entertain them.
Yeah, and the feedback is instantaneous. Because when I was an actor, I could be in plays and I go, this is awful. The audience know this is awful, but we'll just get through it in silence. And at the end, they'll clap and I'll walk off.
Right.
Whereas with stand-up comedy, you know it's awful right there and then because the instant feedback of laughter and applause is gone and you go, oh dear.
Yeah.
And you either cut your losses and go, or if you're really dogged, you stay there for the amount of time you've been booked to perform.
Have you ever walked a room? Have you ever just stuck with it and get people?
And other times as well, I've dug my heels in to do my time because I knew management were watching. And it's like, I better do my time or close to it.
I know you interact with the audience.
Yes.
Will you if things are quiet, will you go into the audience and
Absolutely. I mean, over 20 years you develop lots and lots of different skills and just ways of feeling your way around the room. So there's doing your material and there's crowd work. And generally I'll try and mix up between the two because I find that the most intoxicating thing to watch myself.
Okay.
If someone is all material, I'll go, oh, unless the material's fantastic, this is going to get boring.
Okay.
Conversely, if someone is entirely crowd work, you're there going, well, this is great that you're quick on your feet, but have you got any jokes?
Yeah, I actually watched, I think the only time I've ever done it, I went to in Hermosa Beach in California, there was this dude who did an entire set, all crowd work.
Yeah.
From beginning to end. And I was like, he was funny, it was enjoyable, but I had never seen 100% crowd work before.
Yeah, I saw an Edinburgh show that was 100% crowd work, and although it was impressive, I did leave feeling a little bit shortchanged.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Australia.
Yes.
You're here a lot.
I am.
Why is that?
Number of reasons. I am married to an Australian. We're now separated, but for 10 years we were together, and she's also a performer.
Okay.
And works in the arts. So we would follow the summer together.
Oh, I see.
And it was wonderful when it worked. It was like a merry-go-round of... Because Festivals tend to be when a city is at its best. So in Melbourne, it's late summer. In Adelaide, it's late summer. August is Edinburgh, which is sort of the tail end of their summer.
Yes.
So we're following this sunset almost around the planet, doing all of these festivals.
Does your particular form of comedy work especially well here?
I would say what's interesting about Australian comedians, there's loads of amazing ones, and much like the British, they've got, because they're influenced by British television, I think a lot of it comes straight from the BBC to the ABC, so they're very strong on their poetic and surreal comedians. One thing I think British comedians have an advantage over Australian comedians is the bigger population. There's nearly 70 million people in the tiny island that is Great Britain. Australia, 25 million, smeared over a continent, mostly around the edges.
Right.
So British comedians tend to work a lot more. We'll do maybe 5 or 6 shows a week when it's busy, whereas an Australian comedian would do 2 or 3. So we turn up for these festivals and we're a bit more match fit and we're a bit better at crowd work just because we've had
more reps.
More reps, exactly.
Yeah, more reps. You know, I had a comedian here earlier this week who was saying you really got to keep things fresh in Australia. It's hard to practice a lot.
Because if you live in Melbourne, you can do every gig in Melbourne twice, and then people want to see new stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have an advantage because you get to formulate it abroad.
Yeah, but I can turn up and I've got a back catalogue of maybe when I first came here 10 years worth of stuff to pick from.
Yeah.
But also there's that lovely thing as an Englishman coming to Australia, you're a fish out of water, and that's always nice when you turn up somewhere and go, oh, I've noticed this and this and this, and if you've got a unique take on it, people like it. If you turn up and go, oh, Australia, some of your animals are deadly.
Yeah, I've made some bad scorpion jokes.
Folding their arms, going, yeah, we are aware that some of our animals are deadly.
How do you cultivate that? I actually think this is an important idea.
Okay.
So obviously, naturally, being an outsider helps.
Yeah.
But just being an outsider is not enough. There has to be something else to it, right? Because I'm an outsider here, and I haven't become any funnier.
But I think in some ways, being an outsider is what a comedian does. Even a Melburnian comedian would come up to a room full of strangers and go, I'm a little bit unusual. Or they can go the other way and go, we're all the same, this is our common ground. But I think the exciting and interesting comedians do offer a fresh, a window into a world that the audience wouldn't otherwise know.
Yeah, but how do you, how? I mean, it may come naturally to you.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's probably automatic for you 20 years in. But, what's happening? Is it just you pay more attention?
What, me personally?
Yeah, when you're noticing, what's an insight from Australia that you've had?
Yeah.
Right, about how it's different, and you get to point it out to the Aussies.
I've made some observations about many Australian things over the years. I mean, I talk about the vastness of it.
Okay.
I talk about some of the cultural differences.
You're comparing to the UK.
Compared to the UK. And also there is that thing like they've got preconceptions about what an Englishman should be like.
Okay.
And I can play with that a little bit.
Okay.
And go, oh, I'm quite uptight and... Oh, I find you lot a little bit rough around the edges, and then at the same time I can sort of Aussie it up a bit because I've spent a bit of time here. Okay. So you're always toying with them in terms of how much you know, how much you don't know, and what you reveal of that.
Yeah, I see. This is a total aside. So I can call you an Englishman?
Yeah, I mean I'm British as well.
Yeah, I know. I never know. I always play it safe and say British.
Yeah.
How do I know whether it's... Is it ever not okay to call someone an Englishman?
If they're Scottish.
Yeah, well, that would get them.
Or if they're from Northern Ireland as well.
Yes, of course. But
as you might know, Great Britain is in a state of upheaval at the moment with the Brexit, Scottish independence movement. You know, things are changing, and we're sort of doing a lot of the fluid border stuff that Central Europe did.
I see.
28 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. I just know. I always say British. I just keep it very safe.
In the same way that if someone's got a North American accent, I will never say to them, "Are you from North America?" Because if you accuse a Canadian of being American,
that's true.
They go, "No, we're not one of that lot."
Yeah, that's true. Luckily, there's not that many of them, so you don't.
Canadians.
You're pretty safe in terms of.
There's a few around Melbourne, I'd say.
Is that right?
Yeah.
But it's sort of. I don't know how many people live in Canada. Not that many.
Yeah, not as many as America.
No. I mean, I wish there were more. I love the Canadians. We need more Canadians. What are you best at?
I'd say improvising. Improvising.
Okay.
That's when the magic truly happens. For me,
okay.
I think maybe it's also because I enjoy it the most. Because if you do a well-honed bit of material, you know where it's going. But if you surprise yourself with a bit of comedy, the audience can see the joy that you get from it, and they will join in on that.
Is that a way to take what would be work and turn it into play?
Absolutely, yeah. That's where there are some gigs where you walk away going, that went well, but that felt like work. There are other gigs where you kind of skip off stage and you want to say to the MC, "Did you see that bit?"
Right. Do you get nervous?
Yeah, I still, even today, I'll pace up and down.
Okay.
And I've been told that around about 5 p.m, I'm less good company if I've got a gig later on, because I'm starting to sort of flash forward to what I might be talking about later that night.
And do you do anything in particular to get prepped for a show?
As you can see here, I've got a notepad full of... I write out a set list.
Okay, so you're working... Because you're performing tonight, right?
Yeah, I'll be doing the Comics Lounge tonight, and these are the jokes I did last night, and I'll be doing something similar.
What do you got? Give me one of these.
Oh, my goodness.
This is how I make my podcast funny.
Yeah.
I just ask people what they're working on.
Well, the one that's going particularly well, and again, Australians love this joke, is that in 2006... a lovely Australian girl said to me, "Hey, we should get married." And then in 2016 she said, "Oh, I don't think we should be married anymore." Which I believe makes me an Australian record holder for having received the longest "yeah, nah" in history. So I've got the jokes about Australia to start with to prove that I know my way around Australia and get
build some connections.
Build a bit of connections with local knowledge. Then I talk about being married. I talk about no longer being married and how that's going to affect my life in the future as I am, thrust out into the world, a middle-aged man, single again. What joy! And then if I've got time, I'll talk about history. So I talk about the formation of Australia and how that.
So you bookend it.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, you want to have I like a bit of narrative. And this is why I like festivals, because when you do a festival show, it's an hour show, they've come to see you and no one else, and you can take them on some sort of journey and tell a story.
And so as you build the order of that set list, that's what you're thinking about. How do I create a story? Obviously, you don't start with your divorce and then your marriage, right? Like you start with the marriage and the divorce.
Yeah, you try and make it chronologically accurate. Yeah. This is a club gig that I'll be doing tonight.
Okay.
So you can do a mixture of little stories, but also snippets of crowd work, jokes. Just everything is kind of geared towards keeping the laugh rate up, and the energy and enjoyment up. Then when you do a festival show, you can just dial the pace down a little bit.
Okay.
Because, they trust you. They've bought a ticket to see just you.
Mm-hmm.
On a club night, they've come to see the comedy.
Right. They may not even know they show up because they're expecting laughs.
Yeah, and these are the sort of people afterwards, they'll come up to you and go, were you on earlier? And you just stared at me for half an hour. Oh, yeah, that was great.
I do this, so I teach an MBA course, and when I meet people who are MBAs at other universities, I ask them the name of the person who teaches my course. Yeah. Because there's a good chance I know that person. It's a small field. And very often they'll go, some Korean guy, I think.
Yeah.
Or, it was, you know what I mean? And I'm just like, and I just think, shit.
We get this all the time. We went to the comedy, we saw a funny guy. He had hair and he was fat. Yeah. And the horrible thing is, I'll be there going, oh, that's John Fothergill. But I'll know straight away from that description.
And I am just like, I pour my heart and soul into that class.
Yeah.
Like it's 8 hard weeks of teaching. Like I'm just like sweating blood sometimes.
But for these students, they clock you once and go, right.
Yeah.
And then they want to extract the information out of you, not the biographical details.
Yeah, and then they don't even remember who I am. So I'm like, is it probably a good thing to remind myself of that when they're pissed at me?
Yeah.
That too. So I want to talk about this. I want to get back to a few things. I have one question about Australia that I want to ask you, but before I get into this. So I think this is a problem with comedy. I think that comedians are terribly branded. Right. You guys all look alike.
The white male ones do, yes. Absolutely.
You all look alike. You all have these names that are hard to remember. I mean, you have a pretty good name, but like...
Yeah, if I'd thought about it more when I was younger, I would have preferred a short, punchy name. Uh-huh. Just because it looks bigger on the poster.
Yeah.
And if it's noteworthy, people remember it.
Yeah, I think that... I mean, obviously comedians don't think marketing until too late, oftentimes. They just think comedy. You have a good name, Gordon Southern, right? It's 2 syllables, 2 syllables. Uh-huh. Wait, what are you writing down?
I'm just writing down because this was a very good example of someone who thought about marketing first. And he's a global brand now, as his name
Who is it?
Is Russell Brand.
Russell Brand.
And he
is that his real name?
I'm pretty sure it isn't.
Okay.
But because I saw his career, he's a little bit younger than me, but he grew up 5 miles away from where I grew up.
Okay.
But he, after messing around a bit with a sort of druggy TV presenter lifestyle, he got a stylist. He started to look like a sexy cowboy from the future.
Right.
And his accent suddenly became very Jack Sparrow from the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. And his stock rose almost inexorably.
He's hard to ignore.
Yeah.
He's easy to remember.
But he understood the marketing side of things. Whereas, for comedians, we don't understand it. I'm still dragging my heels about sending out press releases for a festival that I'm doing in 2 months. And I should be getting on with it. But there's something about the comedian's massive ego and low self-esteem, which makes us who we are, I think, that you go, oh, I don't really want to bother any journalists with my silly little show. And then you get to the festival and you go, why aren't journalists seeing my genius show? This is terrible.
And I think also the thing that attracts people to comedy is that they don't want to play by the rules. They want to sit in the back of the classroom and entertain, but not do the homework. So there is a great irony, I think, of artists, is that the thing that makes them great artists is that they don't behave and they don't follow rules. And
little bit. I mean, we're all self-employed and we all hate our boss, which is not the best combination.
Yeah, and so then, but I think there's some who get really, like, I think about Larry the Cable Guy. There's a lot of people who look down on Larry the Cable Guy. I know you're familiar with him.
Do you know
He's one of these blue-collar guys.
I'm aware of the idea of him because there's a lot of canny comedians who say, I'm going to be that thing, and it needs to be shorthand. And I never want to get pigeonholed by that shorthand. Like maybe over here it's like, oh, he's that English guy who's a bit confused about Australia.
I see.
But in Great Britain, I want to be as versatile as possible, and that marketing-wise makes me impossible to sell. That's nailing jelly to a wall. Whereas the cable guy, it's like, I'm Larry, and I'm the cable guy.
And people you know exactly what you're getting.
Know what they're getting straight away.
Yeah. And I don't know, I've never met him. I hear I haven't looked into it deeply, but my guess is that if I met Larry the Cable Guy at a cafe, or a coffee shop, probably not a cafe. Larry Cable Guy doesn't go to a cafe, or his alter ego,
right.
Whoever he really is in life. He doesn't talk like that, and you know what I mean? Like he's just in the same way Russell Brand's affectations changed.
Yeah, I think as soon as you point a camera or a spotlight at Russell Brand, the brand that is Russell Brand is activated.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Here's my Australia question for you. So, and this is for non-Australian listeners, which I expect I'll have more of. Perth and Adelaide.
Yes.
Never been to either of those places.
Okay.
Give me a quick summary of them and make the case for why I should visit one over the other.
Okay. I'm very fond of Adelaide because that was the first Australian city I came to. My wife is from Adelaide.
Okay.
Adelaide is a very beautiful, compact country town that also finds itself to be the state capital of an enormous bit of territory.
Yes.
It really, it's like a desert flower because it springs to life vibrantly every March. It has the Fringe Festival, it has WOMAD, it has a big horse racing event, it has a big motor racing event, there's cycling in January. So in the summer, Adelaide crams all of its culture into a few short weeks and just says to the rest of the world, come, have a look. It's all going off in Adelaide. Okay. For the rest of the time, I hear it's a very sleepy country town that goes to bed early.
Okay.
So Adelaide, I'm very fond of.
So, but I go in March.
But you go in March, you will be blown away by how much is going on. And it's a very pretty place. There's lots of nice countryside, the Adelaide Hills, which is the sort of the food area and where the wine comes from. And then you're a short tram journey to the beach.
Okay.
So it's got a lot going on in a very compact bit of space.
All right, so that sounds fun.
Perth is like, I think, a bigger version of Adelaide.
Okay.
But because of its remoteness, it also feels a little bit of an outpost.
That's the second time I've heard that term.
Not just Australia, but also the British Empire.
Okay.
Because it's full of British people who came over in the 70s, including a lot of my distant relations. So when I go to Perth, I've got to put a thing on Facebook. Do you want to come see my show? We don't really know each other, but we're related.
Yeah. Perth seems... I like being in Australia because you're far away from it all. I think that's both the benefit and cost of Australia.
Yeah.
Perth seems you're as far away from it all as you can be.
Yeah, I mean, and the nearest major conurbation to Perth, I believe, is Bali.
I don't even know what that is.
That's an Indonesian island.
Oh,
because
Bali.
the amount of desert
really?
that surrounds Perth, there's not really a lot. There's a couple of small towns. I was lucky enough to actually tour regional Western Australia, going up the northeast coast.
Okay.
And it was like some of the drives with your foot right down, going as fast as you can, 10 hours between towns.
Is that right?
And nothing in the gaps other than there'd be occasional roadhouses or gas stations, which were exactly one tank of petrol apart. Someone worked it out.
Yeah, that's right. No one, and if you built one in between those two, someone would burn it down.
Or people, because but I'm sure you do this in America as well. You're driving along, going, "Oh, that gas is quite expensive."
Yeah.
I'll wait until the next one.
And it's like last of the sign.
Do that in WA, you're dead.
Yes, that's right. Just stop whenever there's a gas station.
Stop, fill up to the top.
That's interesting. So you like to improvise, but you obviously have material that you start. What do you have a favorite opener? Do you start with something that kicks things off?
Depends where you are. I mean, I used to have an opener in the UK for years that just doesn't work in Australia.
Okay.
Because tradespeople here are more respected. But in the UK, the joke was, I used to be a plumber. I did that for 212 years. That's just an estimate. And in the UK, that would work because people go, "Hey, tradespeople are duplicitous." But then you come to Australia and people go, "No, we quite like our tradesfolk here, so we wouldn't really get that joke."
It's a little flatter society here, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there's definitely a rigid caste or a class system, in the UK, whereas in Australia there seems to be a lot more fluidity. Under the surface, I think it's still there.
Mm-hmm. The sort of tall poppy idea I think is interesting.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know this, The saying is the tall poppy gets cut down.
Don't get a big head about yourself.
Yeah, I tend to think of that as like very Asian in a sense. Like, so the Japanese have a saying about
Right.
The nail that sticks up gets hammered down. As an American, that we don't have any saying.
Well, no,
about
because
that.
you've got the American dream, which is that you could, if
could be
you
the
just
nail.
knuckle down,
Yes.
you could be the next president.
Yeah, and well, let's not go there. But so that's sort of consistent. This plumber idea, right? Like no one's sort of too good. Am I over applying that?
I love about Australia. I call it the fair go thing. That everyone should have a fair go.
I see.
And society is struggling. There will be, government support for you and different organisations that will help you. And also, don't overreach with your ambition and your sense of self.
Okay.
And I think, a lot of the Australians regard they're super wealthy. In America, they'd be seen as an elite, whereas I think in Australia, they're seen as maybe a pest or a parasite.
A little embarrassing.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Vulgar.
Yes. You mentioned this idea of hating your boss.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Well, this is something that I think, I mentioned it earlier, a lot of comedians have a very strange relationship with their own sense of self because we have an inflated ego and that desire to sort of entertain people and be validated, and at the same time you go, I'm probably not worth bothering about, and it sort of oscillates throughout the course of the day.
How do you deal with that?
Because
it hurt.
Therapy.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Do you have a good therapist?
Well, I've actually written, my new show is about a crazy relationship that I had with a therapist who was great for me, but then after we stopped doing the therapy, we became friends, and then certain things were revealed about him that I went, wow, he's in a lot of trouble himself. Because it is that sort of physician heal thyself thing that I go, obviously you need a therapist to deal with your problems, and so, and it goes up and up and up to what I assume would be the ghost of Sigmund Freud.
Yeah, it's like a pyramid scheme.
Very much, yeah.
So I become friends with a lot of people I kind of come into play with. Like I'll have drinks with my contractor who works at my house, or invite him to a party, or the person who does my financial planning. I invite her to things and so on. To me, that's not unusual. I mean, I think it's an unusual thing, but it's not unusual for me to do that.
Yeah.
I have like a great deal of affection for my therapist. He's worth every penny that I pay him. But I don't think I'd become friends with him.
Well, this is the thing. We packed down the process of therapy because I was going to Australia for several months. He went, well, we can't really carry on.
Okay.
And then we became friends, and then he stopped practicing therapy. And I kind of missed that. Because it's like, well, you were very useful to me. And then I thought, hang on, were you useful to me, or was just talking aloud over these things useful to me? So I've now got a very different take on what the therapeutic process is.
I'll tell you what I think. I think that it's both.
Yes.
Actually, I think therapy provides a triple threat. So the first one is the act of going to a therapist, signing up, deciding you need it, want it, already sets in motion positive change.
And that's almost like taking a tablet for an illness. Even if it's a placebo, you will start to feel better because you've made that action.
Yeah, there's just this thing that you've recognized that this is a problem and you need to fix it, and that if it's serious enough that you're going to bring in an expert and pay them a lot of money.
Yeah.
That alone already spurs, I think, the other kinds of associated behavior. Second one is, you're in crisis. Making the appointment already helps.
Yeah.
Right, so you're having a tough time. You make an appointment with your therapist. Now you know there's help on the way.
Yeah.
That already helps. And then the last part is like this combination of hearing yourself talk about this stuff and sometimes how ridiculous you might sound.
Yeah.
And then the other one is a good therapist. Right? So that, by the way, all of that first part is independent of how good the therapist is.
Absolutely.
Doesn't even matter if they're good or not. Their existence and your interaction with him or her already helps you.
Because he was my second therapist. The first therapist I would call from the nodding dog school of therapy. where they just go, yeah, how's that make you feel? And you go, are you even listening? And bizarrely, again, this is something that might turn up in my show, this female therapist warned me that she lives in my neighbourhood, will that be a problem? And I said, I'm sure it won't be a problem. London, there's a lot of people in London.
Yes.
It's highly unlikely I'll bump into you.
Right.
What was even more unlikely was that her house actually backed onto mine.
Okay.
And after 9 weeks of therapy, I'm doing the washing up, looking out my window, and I go, oh no, I've got a therapist at the bottom of my garden. And because they've got this big open plan kitchen, I'm looking into their world and going, well, they're not the most functional looking of families. What makes her an expert?
Right.
So I had again this strange thing where I go, well, your life doesn't appear to be in order, so how can you fix mine? Which is a strange way of looking at things, because the two things can be exclusive.
I actually agree. Like the way is like the best athletes aren't always the best coaches.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes I think. I mean, I do think it is hard to find a good therapist. They're because it's a match. It's like a matching process. Yeah. This is really fun. I want to talk to you about this big change you have in your life. So you're getting divorced.
Yes.
Are you sure you're getting divorced?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's just a matter of paperwork now.
So you're 40?
46.
46.
Yeah, what a cliche.
And you're going to be single again.
Washed up comedian.
You look young. You look younger than 46.
Well, we don't have to do mornings, and I haven't got kids, so that's something that ages people quite quickly.
You're not very grey.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I mean, I'm grey. I'm 47.
Right. Okay.
So, how are you feeling about this?
Do you know what? It's not been an easy couple of years.
Is that right?
It's been quite rocky. What's been more difficult is family health. My father has had a health problem. Well, it's not a health problem, it's a condition, dementia. And that has rapidly sort of, just like a fire, it's engulfed the whole family.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I have issues of guilt that I'm not doing my bit in terms of daily care around that family situation. So when people say, how's the divorce going? I go, the divorce is really bad, but this for me is worse and harder to deal with.
I think that I went through this a bit younger. My mom had some health issues. Mm-hmm. My dad passed when I was young. I was 27. And I don't know how to say this well. I was unprepared for that. I mean, I'm a responsible guy. I'm an organized, responsible guy. I was the person who stepped up and did my best to help with this situation. But, man, that was hard. And I was unprepared for it. Like, nothing in life really, I think. I mean, maybe if I had been a father, I would have been better prepared for it because of... But the idea of parenting your parent...
is an interesting concept. And my way of coping with these things is to write shows about it. So the show I did 2 years ago was about me and my father and how, as a family, we coped with dementia. Mm-hmm. And then last year's show, it was supposed to be about Brexit and Trump, but it turned out to be that Brexit, Trump, and my divorce were all intertwined.
Okay.
And this is how I deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Turning the tragedy into comedy.
Absolutely, because that's how I deal with any difficult situation, is to try and see the funny side of it, because I think that once you can laugh at something serious, you take away that monster. You turn the monster into something comical.
I agree.
I think I've just told you the plot to the movie Monsters, Inc., by the way.
I'm sure you have. The research on this, well, I should say, there's a lot of theoretical work that suggests that you're absolutely right. That is, that comedy helps with tragedy by way of 4 paths. The actual laughing is good for you.
Physical, yeah.
But minor, but good. The positivity associated with the comedy is really good for you.
And I think the collected experience, it makes you feel less alone in the world. Yeah.
The social element of it, that it can actually help people rally around you. We want to help people who we like, and we tend to like funny people more than tragic people.
Yeah.
And then the last one, which is I think what you're describing most, is when you're able to make jokes about this terrible thing seems less terrible.
Exactly.
It loses its teeth, so to speak. So I think that's probably the best therapy you can do.
Well, yes, and what's interesting in politics is that in recent years I've noticed a real sea change, that people are electing entertainers rather than professional politicians.
Mm-hmm.
Because
to varying degrees of success.
Well, I'd say that Donald Trump is much more of an entertainer than anything else. In Great Britain, people like Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage, I think these are monsters because they've worked out that if they look like a bumbling buffoon with a quick wit,
yes,
they can seize power.
Yeah.
And I think Trump is the same, because sometimes I think Trump is a moron. Then you go, well, he can't be, because he managed to engineer becoming president of America. A moron couldn't do that.
Yeah. I think actually the mistake that people make is to not look deeply enough into what's going on behind the scenes.
And this is where I think, as a comedian, you can choose whether or not you also, within your comedy, have a social responsibility.
Yes. Yeah, whether you want to go there or not.
Because there are laughs that are easy, but are also expensive in other ways.
What do you mean?
Know what I mean?
No, I don't.
Well, I had a debate with, almost an argument with a comedian yesterday, because I said, there's a couple of bits in your show that are kind of, I don't know, I think they might be transphobic. And he said, no, I've checked it. And in the same way that someone who's making racist jokes, he said, I've got a lot of friends who are transsexual. In the way that in the old days a comic would go, I'm not racist, some of my best friends are black.
Yes.
And then we talked about it a little bit, and he said, look, all of my stuff, I don't think there's any problem with it. I don't think you were listening properly. And then he sort of went, but I do have a problem with trans people. I think it's got out of hand. And I sort of wanted to say, and just by the fact that you feel that way, that comes across.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah,
no doubt. So 2 questions, we'll wrap. What are you reading, watching, or listening to that really stands out to you as great?
Wow. Okay, at the moment, because I'm trying to write a show, I'm trying to feed myself with as much information as possible. Stephen King's On Writing.
Oh yes, murder your darlings.
I knew that for years.
Yes.
Trim the fat, kill your babies. But that's been very useful. I'm also reading a wonderful book by a West Australian author, Tim Winton, which is called Cloud Street.
Okay, what's that about?
Well, if you want to go to Perth and you can't be bothered doing the long flight, maybe read Cloud Street. It's a lovely story, a saga set in Perth at around the end of World War II, and I've not finished it yet, but it seems to span a whole generation, and it really gives a lovely insight into Australian culture and that sort of larrikin vibe that you get from Australian working people. Larrikin.
Well, I don't know what
the
that is.
Larrikin is like a maverick or a cowboy type.
I see.
Doesn't go by the rules, and that's something that I think is very entrenched in Australian culture.
Okay.
I quite like that about Australia.
Yeah, nice.
Listening to, oh goodness me,
that stands out because there's the problem is that everything's good.
Yeah.
Nowadays. So what's
See,
great?
I'm not, as a lot of people are, addicted to watching comedy on YouTube, and I think this is something we talked about a minute ago. I prefer the shared collective experience of live comedy. And I think when you watch it on your phone, because you're not even going to laugh out loud, because why would you?
Yeah,
you don't need to signal to people around you that you're enjoying it.
Yes,
and I think that might be one of the nails in the coffin of live stand-up comedy, is that people go, well, I could just watch the content for free on my phone, and then look at it and go, yeah, it's pretty good, but I don't think it's worth paying a load of dollars to leave the house for.
Yeah, it is amplified in a club.
Yeah, I think going to a club and going to a theatre and watching live comedy, it's almost like you wouldn't watch a church service. You'd have to go to it to experience it.
Right. Although in the United States we have... Do
you have online churches
for
the housebound? Of course you do.
Yeah.
Well, that's televangelist, isn't it? That's a big
right.
thing.
Yeah. Okay, last question. What's the secret to success that everyone knows but they can't seem to do?
Oh, do the work.
Okay.
Whenever you fail, it's because you haven't done the work. And I think there's also, within a lot of comedians, a strange self-sabotage mechanism.
Okay.
Where you go, whatever I do, I should not stuff up this particular occasion, because this could be big for me if I don't stuff it up.
Stuff it up means...
get it wrong. Make a mistake.
Yeah.
Throw it away.
Whatever you do not screw this up.
Yeah, don't screw it up.
Yeah.
And for a lot of successful comedians, they've worked that out and they bring their A game when it's necessary.
Okay.
For most comedians, there are moments when you go, oh, why did I let it get to me? And a great example is in London, there's a gig called The Comedy Store.
Okay.
One of the finest comedy rooms in the whole world, beautifully set up, brilliant staff. No one's more than 10 metres from the comedy, and yet there's 400 people crammed into the room.
Yeah. Great room.
Great room, one of the best I've ever played. And you have open spots who come, trial spots, tryouts.
Okay.
And they'll come along, and even if they've got years of experience, they see the room, and you just see their eyes go. They go, I'm freaking out, I'm daunted. And you can explain to them, this is the easiest room to play.
Okay.
As long as you don't get nervous, you'll be fine.
Okay.
And of course they get nervous.
Yeah.
And they die.
They tighten up.
Yeah, exactly.
And the audience knows.
They can smell fear like a dog can.
Yeah. So when you say do the work, define that for me.
If you're a writer-based comedian,
You gotta sit and
get
do
your
the
laptop
writing.
open.
That sounds
and do
like
the
Stephen
writing.
King on writing.
Oh, he was great. He said, read a lot, write a lot, and then it'll all come to you. There's a lot of basic fundamental rules. You can go to a comedy course to find those out, or if you've got half a brain, you'll learn them quickly enough.
Yeah.
Don't tell the audience they're stupid. Don't tell the audience they should be enjoying themselves more. I still sometimes make that mistake.
Yeah. You tell the audience you're stupid.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing is that, you want them to be laughing at you and or with you. But if you're laughing at them, that's bullying.
I'm surprised how often comedians blame the audience when they're not being funny.
Whereas we know. We say the lighting was wrong and the sound wasn't quite right, but we know.
Yeah, deep down. I've apologized to my students for, I come in and I say, on Monday I wasn't very good. I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, I think on a few occasions I've offered money back to entire audiences.
I'm sure the owner of the club's not thrilled about that.
I don't think you do that in a 20-minute gig. Unless you're headlining, there is that thing that I'm actually a liability right now. I'm walking. Because then hopefully the rest of the acts can turn it around.
I see.
And people have a good night. If you're headlining or if it's a solo show, then you do have the responsibility to somehow take it home. Or if they're being weasels, if they're all drunk and boisterous and horrible, which can happen, it happens less and less. But as you get better, the gigs get better. But you can sometimes go, right, this is going so badly, and then you flip the switch and you go, right, I'm going to make them hate me so much.
Right.
That it's at least a cathartic experience.
At least
in some
they'll
way.
remember this.
And that's quite fun to do and great fun to watch.
Yeah,
when a comedian falls on his sword.
Bill Burr has like a famous thing in Philadelphia where he just starts insulting the audience.
Yeah.
He's like 9 more minutes to go.
Yeah.
He's like 7 more minutes and he's just going on
And it's
on.
very entertaining. There's a gig I used to MC called Late and Live at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which started at 1 a.m.
Wow.
And that was often a gladiatorial affair.
I can imagine.
And so comedians would go, what are we going to do? We're going to do comedy or are we just going to fight? And if you want to, they'll give you abuse for 20 minutes, you throw it back.
Okay.
And everyone walks away like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's like they've not been to the comedy, they've been to a dogfight.
Yeah, it's like a boxing match.
Exactly.
Gordon, this was a lot of fun.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to visit petermcgraw.org for more information about our guest, show notes, and social media links. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with others. Join Dr. Peter McGraw next week for another fun, fascinating conversation on I'm Not Joking.
Yo.